There's a lot of research that says that when kids have that self-awareness and that metacognition about their learning, that actually can boost academic success even more than summer school. Just having that self-awareness and knowing where you're strong is going to boost that self-esteem, that self-confidence, and that well-being for the child.
Hello and welcome to the Future is Clear, Teach Like It's 2045 webcast series. My name is Scott Carr from CESA 2. Today's topic area is identifying student skills and strengths to personalize students' learning needs. Joining us today is Courtney Claud from MindPrint Learning. Courtney has been is the director of partnership and sales at MindPrint Learning for almost 2 years. She is a former assistant principal, literacy coach, and teacher. She was born and raised in Illinois, which we won't hold against her, considering we're in Wisconsin here. But currently, she resides in Orlando, Florida, which must be nice. She lives with her husband, 2 kids, and golden retriever or retrievers?
Both, too.
Two. Nice, yeah. Nice. As I said before, I've got an English Mastiff sitting right behind me that's kind of snoring a little bit. I hope it doesn't disrupt our webcast here, but thanks for joining us and bringing your knowledge around MindPrint Learning and you know the platform that it is. We're going to talk a lot about it, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. This is a pleasure. Yeah.
I became aware of MindPrint from Jen Townsend, who's a part of CESA 2 for us. And she knows the product. She speaks highly of it, so I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about it, but also a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you got where you're at. So why don't we start there? Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get where you're at today?
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, you kind of shared a little bit about my bio. So I always like to see the thread throughout a career, right? It actually all started with some extra coursework in my undergrad around neuroscience learning that I took electively for fun. And then when I became a teacher and as a literacy coach and administrator, I had a huge focus on differentiated learning and personalized learning, and involved in action research projects and initiatives. And then as an administrator, I had a really heavy focus, as our administrators do today, in database decision making and MTSS. I'm a big believer in all students can learn and figuring out how to help them. So in my building, I actually effectively reduced our school from identifying kids with special needs from 36%, like we were identifying 36% of the children when I got there, to under 20% of the kids in just 3 years with implementing RTI and MTSS processes and data-based decision making. But and then I shifted into ed tech. And in ed tech, I have focused on supporting districts with data-based personalized learning solutions and tools to help close learning gaps and student achievement. But I ended up at MindPrint because my son needed a lot of help when he was in second grade. Like, we were at the point where he wasn't getting out of bed. He was crying every day, hated school. And he was that kiddo that in 2020, he was in kindergarten. And when all of the fun learning was coming together, it hit him hard, and school was no longer fun. And I turned to MindPrint because I needed more answers beyond the traditional assessments that were happening in the school. And because it wasn't helping me understand where the learning was breaking down, because he was really bright in reading comprehension and bright in math, but something was happening with that transferring of learning. And I turned to MindPrint for answers and saw where his strengths were and saw also where he needed that support. And then I empowered him to understand his MindPrint. I empowered him to start to utilize strategies where he was strong in visual memory and visual reasoning in the classroom and advocate for himself in school. And then we knew he was weak in attention and put strategies in place alongside his teacher to help improve his attention and also understand where attention was going to be weak and how to help him and support him through that. So in 2 years, he's caught up. He's on grade level.
Wow.
He's being successful. He loves school now. His teachers love him, and he speaks very highly of MindPrint, um, and just empowering him. And he knows what his strengths are. So I think his future looks very bright now. So I'm a big believer. That's why I'm here and kind of how my career took me all the way here.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, you enjoyed it so much you decided to join the team.
Yes. Yeah. We
Yeah.
actually implemented MindPrint for a year as a family before I came over.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. I've really enjoyed, kind of learning more about MindPrint. Our conversation the other day was really good. And again, like I've had conversation with Jen at CESA too, a little bit about it, but let's talk a little bit about the why in regards to it. I know that, MindPrint's had a very positive impact on students and learning. And it seems to be really important, those types of tools or strategies within our school system. But, I want to ask you, why the need do you believe that we have to have a change kind of in education to include more approaches like this, to include more opportunities for our students to get to know who they are?
Yeah. Well, so we all have learner variability, right? We
Mm,
all learn in different ways. None of us is the same. We all have just like we all have a unique fingerprint, we all have a unique mind print.
mm,
And so, when we think about education, we often heavily rely on student achievement data, and we don't start to look into other areas of data until there's a problem in student achievement data. We'll
mm,
go look at social and emotional learning data, resiliency data, behavior data, and then when we've ruled out all of these other things, that's when we start to dive into the cognitive skills. And typically we don't look at cognitive skills until we're pursuing an IEP for a child.
mm,
And so
mm,
we're really only looking at cognitive skills on about 10 to 15% of our students. And what we learn about a child when we get that cognitive skills, it can really help us in crafting that personalized learning for children. So why not do that for all kids? Why not understand all kids' cognitive strengths and where they need support right away? Because we can do it in a very efficient and inexpensive way. Um, and the thing is like what we know too, what we've been doing with all this heavy focus on just looking at achievement gaps, we keep looking at what kids don't know and trying to fill in that skill deficit area
mm.
with more content knowledge and more subject area and reteaching. But the thing is we actually the child may have actually understood those concepts in the lesson. It actually might be a different issue. It might be a memorization issue, or it may
Wow.
be an executive function issue. So we can actually accelerate learning and close these gaps faster if we look at the strengths of cognitive skills and the gap areas.
Yeah, wow, that's really interesting. With the work that I do, as we talked the other day also, the the finding out more about the student is so vital, right? It leans into then the ability for the student to know who they are, to find that relevance in the school system and in the things that's being asked of them on a daily basis. So that's really cool. It is above and beyond a little bit, in relationship to what we typically do with school. But with increasing that focus, though, in personalizing it, using those skills that you measure, the executive functioning, memory, critical thinking, some of those types of things. Why do you see those measurements in those areas important?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, as I was just saying, like we spend a lot of that time analyzing that achievement data, right? And we know the gaps that we need to close. Like we know that the kids may not know division, or they may not know um, they may be lacking comprehension skill or a piece, and then we have to go and reteach a concept. But sometimes we go back to reteaching and we go all the way back to the basics, to the understanding the information, and utilizing complex reasoning. And the thing is it may actually not be a complex reasoning issue. The child may have understood the concept well, and they can demonstrate that complex reasoning and that understanding right there in that small group mini lesson, that reteach. But they may have actually performed poorly because they have a memory issue. Perhaps they're struggling with a verbal memory or visual memory, and they didn't get a lot of practice opportunities to memorize, and commit it to that long-term memory. Or maybe there's an attention issue and they weren't paying attention on the day that they learned it. Or there could be a flexible thinking issue where the concept was taught in one way
Mhm.
and they didn't apply, but the question was asked differently. So when we can understand these different areas of cognitive learning and understand where kids' strengths are and where their areas of support, we can lean into those areas of strength and the way increase the speed at which kids learn, because we can be presenting that information in a way that makes sense for their brain. Or if we know that that's an area that needs support, we can utilize strategies that's going to support growing that and compensating for that weak area.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds, I mean, it sounds complex in a way, but it's not. I mean, right? I mean, it's pretty simple, and we can find so many benefits from doing this type of work, right? And
Yeah.
that's so it leads me to wondering, to understand a student's like learner profile and all that information, how does that impact their academic success? How does it, and probably more importantly, what type of impact does that have on their social emotional development?
Yeah. So, well, one, we make it simple. So I want to start there too. I'm going to talk about the academic success and the social emotional learning success, but we make it simple because we can look at that child, we can get that data from the cognitive assessment, and then we match it up for the students based on where their strengths are, and we give them a strategy based on that strength area. So we prioritize what strategies they can utilize. So we make it simple so
Yeah.
that teachers don't have the guesswork about what strategy to that's best for this child. Um, so when we can simplify that and simplify the way teachers are differentiating instruction, it helps academic success tremendously because now teachers are knowing what to teach, the gap that they have to fill, but how to teach it. That's going to make that brain engaged the most way. That's going to make sense for that child to learn that concept. And then also, as that child, once they know that they have strengths, that boosts that social emotional component. It boosts that so much for that child because their confidence goes up. Also, there's a lot of research, and I can always send you some of the research too,
Yeah.
that says that when kids have that self-awareness
Mm.
and that metacognition about their learning, that actually can boost that can boost academic success even more than summer school,
Wow.
which is incredible, right?
Wow.
Um, so, that just having that self-awareness and knowing where you're strong is going to boost that self-esteem, that self-confidence, and that well-being for the child. And I've seen it in my own son.
Yeah, well, I wish they had it back in my day. I would have been able to spend more time at the pool rather than summer school, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, why don't we do this before we might maybe we put the cart in front of the horse a little bit. You've been giving me some really good information, but let's talk real quick, MindPrint learning. What is it? If somebody came
Yeah.
and said, "Hey, tell me what is this stuff?"
Yeah, so it's a solution where it's designed to support intervention and acceleration. We begin with a valid, reliable cognitive assessment that was actually developed at Penn Medicine in their brain-based learning lab. Um, Actually, and NASA uses the same assessment for the
Mm.
astronauts
Wow.
so that they know what the astronauts need when they're in space. So we start with that cognitive assessment. We're measuring the four neurocognitive areas of complex reasoning, executive functions, memory, and your speed. And then we take that information and we share where students are strong and where they need areas of support. We align instructional strategies to those strengths areas in complex reasoning and memory. And then we give strategies to support that weakest executive function skill, because that weakest executive function skill
Mhm.
often is blocking that complex reasoning and that memory and those memory skills. So we provide those strategies. We give strategies to the teachers for instruction. We give strategies to students for studying and for independent learning. We have lots of reports, reports for parents and students, reports for educators at the district level, school level, class level, student level. And then we have a boost course as well for our secondary students to really strengthen their executive function skills and also know how to apply those cognitive strengths into reading and to math. And we'll have a new course available this fall for college and career readiness as well. So that's being developed. And then we have lots of professional development to support the educators in the building. So our solution is very complete where we do a lot of different things to support that cognitive work.
Yeah, great idea, great call for including, the career development piece to it. I think that can really be a home run. What's your footprint look like? How many states are you in? To what level are you guys in our state, Wisconsin?
Yeah. So we're in about 20 states. We're serving thousands of kids
Wow.
all over the US, actually in a couple countries and in Canada, and a couple in Canada and a couple countries in Europe and the Middle East. We're in Wisconsin. We support the Salem School District and quite a few private schools, including the Diocese of Superior School as schools as well. So, yeah, our footprint is growing in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's great. Hopefully we can help it grow a little bit even more as we move forward here with it. What's the history? Where did you guys evolve from? How did you become? Give a little bit of that, a little background.
Yeah. So our CEO and founder, Nancy Weinstein, which I realize that's my name here today on our webcast.
Yeah.
But our CEO and founder actually started the company about 10 years ago when her daughter was struggling in school. And the school turned to her in when her daughter was in third grade and said, "We need more data." And they recommended that she go outside to get that cognitive data. And when she went to the psychologist to begin that process, she said, "What do I tell my daughter about this whole process?" And she said, "Tell her you're giving her the gift of learning." And Nancy in that time dove in and looked and studied a lot of different assessments and found this assessment at Penn Medicine in the brain-based
Mhm.
learning lab and realized that this could provide very similar, even a little bit more data than what that psychologists do. And in the one-to-one, it takes hours, it costs a lot of money. And why not utilize the same type of assessment data and do this for all kids at scale, very efficiently, in just an hour to get all of that information that you can get with a psychologist in hours one-on-one. So we've been around for about 10 years. We started in private schools and tutoring agencies, and now we are working and supporting public schools as well.
Wow. Yeah, sounds like a great solution, great product. Let's talk a little bit about, the what it is, the what behind it, a little bit about how schools are utilizing it. So, with the implementation, how do schools currently implement it and put it into practice?
Yeah. So our probably our most popular implementation is in secondary schools and middle school and high schools. Um, in middle school and high school, they love to get this data to be able to
Mhm.
help kids understand their cognitive abilities, to understand their executive functions and to build that learner agency in students because we want to start empowering kids to know how do they learn best? What are their executive functions? And once we also know these cognitive capabilities in high school, how can that help me with for career readiness? How can that help me select a career? How can that also, we can also predict if kids will do better on the ACT or the SAT based on their cognitive profile. So that is a lot of our implementations. We're also implementing in elementary schools, and elementary teachers take a little bit of a different approach where they really want to utilize that data for differentiated instruction. We have some middle schools that do that too, but that is a loved practice in elementary. And we also see it used for acceleration, for gifted students, for high achieving students, for schools, private schools that want to have that cutting edge so that they can just know a little bit more about cognitively about how they learn to give them that edge. And then finally, in closing gaps in a very targeted, accelerated way. So, a lot of times, teachers will look at their achievement data results, and sometimes some of those reports will say kids are working 2 or 3 years below grade level. Teachers will get overwhelmed and they'll think, oh, I've got to teach 2 or 3 years worth of content. And they're so overwhelmed by that.
Yeah.
Instead, they can utilize MindPrint and understand how to accelerate the learning because they may not need to teach 2 to 3 years of content. They may
Mhm.
just need to teach that vocabulary in a more visual abstract using visual abstract strategies or visual spatial strategies instead of just verbal strategies. And when we can match up those strategies with that content that student is missing, the learning is like a J curve.
Yeah. Takes off very quickly, I bet.
Yeah.
So, talk a little bit about that. What are the student performance and engagement changes that you see?
Yeah. So what we've seen what's been really exciting is in South Carolina, we're implementing in all of our middle schools in a district in South Carolina, and they've been implementing for about 2.5 years now.
Mhm.
And looking at their data from before they were implementing MindPrint, when they started their implementation to after, we actually see this J curve happening in their student achievement data. So they're having tremendous success. We have and so we have a lot of success stories on our website that talk a lot about this student performance that's increasing, also the engagement that's happening. But we recently just published our National Science Foundation, um, partnered with Johns Hopkins University, one of our recent studies that showed how much the Boost course had improved students being able to achieve their math and reading goals and seeing tremendous growth in that, and also seeing an increase in teacher efficacy because we can measure teacher efficacy and student efficacy as well. So we're seeing we're seeing great improvements across in a lot of our implementations.
Yeah. As you know, and when we talked the other day, um, a big part of my work obviously is around career community readiness. You talked a little bit about this just a minute ago, but where do you see this connecting to that career development, and how can it be a tool that could be used to help students find their directions with direction with careers and really help advance them as they move through the school system?
Yeah. So we actually have a great research study on our website that talks about this. But when we know what one's learner variability is, in their cognitive strengths, coupled with that child's personality, that can have a lot of meaningful impact on those career choices. So, and we see relationships between cognitive skills and
Mhm.
career areas. So, for example, those in education field tend to be really strong in verbal reasoning and a bit weaker in abstract reasoning. So, if you're stronger in verbal reasoning, in a career in education may be a great fit, while those in biology and medicine tend to be really strong in both verbal reasoning skills and spatial reasoning skills. And those in computer science are very strong in both abstract reasoning and spatial reasoning. So I think sometimes knowing these things and knowing where these strengths are can help us know which career fields may be a little bit of an easier path for us because we're wired in more of that way. But we don't want to deter kids from specific careers that they may be interested in. For example,
Sure.
let's say a student wants to be a doctor, and which requires a superb memory, but maybe that student has a weaker memory. Um, that student could go into that field knowing that they're going to have to utilize more memorization techniques
Mhm.
that fit their stronger memory area. So if they're stronger in visual memory or verbal memory, they're going to need to know which techniques to use. And they may also need to plan more time for spaced repetition versus a child who's got, really strong memory and will get that concept. So they could, put those techniques in place to support that weaker skill. Or
Yeah.
if they really love that area, they might go into maybe instead of doing the memorization that a doctor or a nurse needs. Perhaps they are going more into um, pharmaceuticals or something where they can check a reference tool, right? Where they can still be in medicine, but maybe just in a different way.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely can help guide when we like to say when students know more about themselves around these types of things, their attributes, their character traits, they can make more informed decisions, right?
Yes.
Which kind of goes against the way our system works a lot of the times. It's, you need to learn this information, you need to gather it. We don't lean into who are you to help with, owning your learning, owning your journey through the educational process. So some really, really good stuff. Um, we, Let me ask this too. When we know more about our students, it allows us to shift, change. I know how does that impact some of the teachers with their teaching?
Yeah.
Like if we know that information, how would you plan differently? If you know this information, how would you approach your students differently? Are you seeing some of those types of moments take place with educators?
Absolutely. So, so one, you could look at this in a couple of different ways, right? You could look at the trend across your whole class. You
Yeah.
know, how is my class split? Do I tend to have a group of stronger visual reasoners versus verbal reasoners? So, teachers tend to be strong in verbal reasoning. So we tend to teach through verbal reasoning strategies just naturally.
Yeah.
And so when they start to see that kids learn differently, they start to open up and utilize more strategies that appeal to maybe their kids with stronger visual abstract or visual spatial and present the information in multiple ways. Or they may even break their students up into small groups and put and have the kids grouped by their cognitive strength area when they are working through that reasoning, and give different strategies, or sorry, they'll still teach the same content, but they could have the kids practice that content in different ways based on how that child learns best. So this group could be practicing that skill with more verbal reasoning. So if I'm unpacking, let's say I'm an ELA teacher and we're reading a novel and we're trying to understand plot, right? My verbal reasoning kids could have a great big discussion about it and write and take notes in the margins, all of those things. Whereas my visual reasoning kids are going to need some graphic organizers to help them comprehend that text and break it down and show it in a more visual way. They might need to be drawing out part of the story. And just a way to simplify this, just so it's kind of easy for everyone who's listening, no matter where
Yeah.
their focus area is. So that's one way to differentiate. Another way is if I know that I've got kids in my class are struggling with working memory and I give directions and I give three directions, pull out your book, turn to page 20 and answer questions 1 through 5. I'm going to have the kids with working memory pull out their book and go, "What did you want me to do?" And teachers
Right.
get frustrated and they think they're not paying attention or they don't care or there's a lack of engagement. And really, it's a working memory issue. So if we can have hold space and maybe instead of verbally saying that, writing it down and creating a resource where the kids can go and look for what those directions are or or putting in some other strategies so that everybody can stay together through that lesson.
Yeah, I'd definitely be that one of the students to say, "Hey, what did you just say?" It's that memory. Well, maybe it's an age thing now, but back in the day, I think definitely same thing. I couldn't remember things, and just knowing that and having the educators around me know that would be such a benefit. Such a
Yeah,
benefit. Wow. I mean,
absolutely.
let's shift a little bit into the how, right? I mean, this seems like it would be something that educators would really embrace and say, wow, we definitely would like to have this type of information. But that's not always the case in education, right? Teachers look at things like this sometimes and go, this is another thing on my plate.
Mhm.
Administrators look at this and say, not sure if this is what we want to invest in, especially when we have to improve reading or, improve math. So how do we, and I love this too. In education, it seems like we need to shift from, what do I need to know to what can I do? And this type of a platform really looks at, what can I do as a student? What can I do? But how do you guys approach this transformation and getting people to understand this is needed?
Hmm. Yeah. So, well, one, because we focus not on what the kids' gaps are or what they need to know. We focus on how they need to learn.
Mm,
So it's all about, what do they need to do? So my one of my favorite features in MindPrint is we have this student report that is organized with and designed for students and parents so that they can see what the child's strengths are in each of their cognitive areas. And it lists their strengths in ranked order and it doesn't have any numbers. So it's not confusing. There's no graphs, there's no data. It's just what are their strengths? And then they list it down to the weaknesses. And everybody's got strengths, right? I have strengths, you have strengths. I have weaknesses, you have weaknesses. And then right below it, what we've done is we've prioritized what's the strategy in each cognitive area. So we've narrowed it down to those cognitive areas, kind of clustering our cognitive skills together and we focus in on the strengths. And so then that is something that the kids can start to do. They can click on that link, the parents can click on that link, and they know exactly what to do to implement that strategy. They can do it at home. It's written in that nice parent friendly language, knowing that a lot of our parents, may have just graduated from only high school, some not even high school, and maybe a little bit of college. Um, and so we want to put that into practice so that there aren't any barriers. And then the what they're doing becomes a little bit easier because the how we're doing is based on their strengths.
yeah. Talk a little bit about, what are the supports? What teacher supports do you guys offer? What does that look like? The integration of this into a school or a classroom. Talk quick about that. What's that look
Sure.
like?
So our teacher supports, we begin with something called science of learning, and it's our first professional development. We want the teachers to first take MindPrint. We want teachers to be aware of their own learner variability and how they learn best, because the way that they learn is probably very different than the way their students learn sitting in front of them. And as they begin to understand just the science learning, this opens hearts and minds to that learner variability and to differentiated instruction. Um, then, after their kids take the cognitive assessment, that will help the teachers understand their mind print data in one of our workshop sessions. And then we can also come back and meet with teachers during their PLCs, their planning time, and help them look at their data and or look at the trends in their classroom. And let's say they say, well, I'm strong in verbal reasoning, but I want to start using more visual reasoning strategies. How do I do that? I'm a science teacher. How do I do that in science? Or I'm a PE teacher. How do I do that in PE? We can teach them that in their PLC workshops, but they can also self-serve that to themselves inside of our platform and go click around and get those instructional strategies. But we have PLC workshops to support that work too.
And it sounds like that long-term program sustainability is built into that too. I mean, how do you how do you see this, continuing that long-term, long-range sustainability?
Yeah, so great question. Um, Students really just need to take this assessment one time in upper elementary, one time in
Mhm.
middle, and one time in high school. So this is not an assessment that they have to return to multiple times a year or even
Wow,
every
that's good.
year. It's just one time in that level. And then that data stays with them the whole time that they're in that level. And the teachers can access that data, so it'll roll through. Those strategies will also be there to support the teachers. And then through the PLC workshops, we can continue to support the teachers in their implementation based on what they need, based on the trends that they're seeing in that year with their students. And we'll just continue to adapt to what they need.
Yeah, it does sound very individualized, yet it's a program. It's something that is that gives merit, but also it is something I can apply in my classroom, apply these strategies. But here it is, I'm also supported with it. Seems very simplistic also if there's only three times that students are assessed through it, which I think is great.
Yeah. Well, we know that there's a lot of overassessment happening right now,
Yeah,
and we
big
just
time.
don't see the need to measure that every single year, because cognitively the where our strengths stay tend to stay for a little while.
Mhm.
Our brain is malleable and it'll change and will grow, but it's pretty stable in that cognitive development.
Yeah. Well, as we near the end here, looking forward, what are some new things? Are there any new things out of MindPrint that's evolving? What's happening?
How we see MindPrint evolving. Um, So one of the exciting things is this year we will be developing our next boost course for uh, career readiness and college readiness, which I think is going to be a great fit in high school. Um, and so we're so excited about that. But we also really see MindPrint becoming more part of the culture and the way that students just naturally speak about their learning, similar to how no one really spoke openly about mental health 20 years ago, but students talk about it more openly now. This year, we are going to be releasing our new college and career readiness boost course for our ninth graders. And so we're excited about that coming out this next fall. And then we're also making more changes inside of our system to our reporting. And those of you that utilize iReady, we're going to have a direct report that links MindPrint and iReady into our system, like we already have with between MindPrint and the map growth test. So those are some of the upcoming changes that are coming up this year. But yeah.
That's super cool. The product itself is really cool, but to be able to advance and tie into the career readiness type stuff is really, really great. Hope you
Yeah.
keep hope you keep me up to speed with it. Like we've talked about, we need to partner with some of this stuff and the work that I'm doing. I think it just has a very natural match. So
Absolutely. I
yeah,
think it'll be exciting to work together.
yeah. All right. Final question here is I asked this of all of our guests. Our tag, as you know, is the future is clear. Teach like it's 2045. So, what do you feel education is going to look like in the year 2045?
Yeah. So I'm sure you probably saw it too, where Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, tweeted
Yeah,
on X over the weekend that we're near the singularity, unclear which side, which, how are we just very close to it or just past it? So,
yeah,
it's clear that we're about to have a major shift just in our world in
yeah.
general.
Big
Um,
time.
Yeah, and if your listeners and viewers don't really know, the singularity is when that Moore's law falls apart. The Moore's law is a chip law where progress is doubling every 2 years. which is
Hmm.
tremendous progress, right? That's yielded the internet, that's yielded smartphones. But with the singularity, that progress is now straight up. And with the singularity, the world's just going to change in ways that we can't even fathom.
Yeah.
Progress has gone from gradual and predictable to exponential and transformative. Our best scientists don't even understand what's going to happen. But
Yeah.
thinking about all that 20 years from now, I still think that our kids are going to need the basics, right? They're going to need to know they're in school. They're going to still need to play together when they're young. They're going to need to learn how to get along and work together. They're going
Yeah.
to know how to read, write, and do math. But I think, though, as we think about upper elementary and secondary, it's going to need to shift to where kids are doing way more problem solving, way more utilizing more flexible thinking, and learning how to ask very good questions that are really going to move us forward. I think that school's going to have to look a little bit differently to create more experiences where that happens. I also think too, we're in an age of personalized learning and AI. So maybe even with the text that kids read are going to be personalized based on their what they're interested in and and what they want to read about instead of just a traditional basal series or specific
Yeah.
text, which will be very cool. But I just think we're going to have to make sure we're supporting kids to think in a really deep way so that we can coexist with this generative AI that we're going to now be living with.
Yeah, right. I agree 100%. I think you say it really well. The just saw on TV too, or whatever it was. It was online probably, but the robots and all of that.
Yes.
The humanity part of it, we're never going to lose. We can't, right? So yeah, you speak to it well. Appreciate it. I really appreciate you joining me today. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Yeah. So on our website, they can go to our website, mindprintlearning.com, or follow us on LinkedIn. If they want to reach out to me personally, I'm also on LinkedIn under Courtney Claud, no E, or email me at Courtney@mindprintlearning.com. I'd be happy to talk with anybody and support in any way that I can.
Yeah, super cool. Really appreciate that. Well, again, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was a pleasure. Thanks for this opportunity today, Scott.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you for joining us, everybody. And as we exit, remember the future is clear. Take care of everybody.